Releasing Trauma is sponsored by the Global Association for Trauma Recovery. The Global Association for Trauma Recovery is a social impact organization serving as a resource for survivors and their families, dedicated to facilitating change by spreading trauma-related awareness and thus creating a more trauma-informed world. Learn more at gaftr.org. Welcome to Releasing Trauma, a Survivor's Podcast. I am your host, Tracy Osborne. I am a survivor of emotional bullying, rape, sexual assault, domestic abuse, and grief. After losing my husband in 2019, I set off on a new adventure to help other women release their trauma and create a life they can cherish. Each week, I will feature a guest expert or a survivor to share their stories, tips, wisdom, and more. The goal is so that you can take away even just the smallest nugget of information you can use in your life right now to make a change, and to remind you that you're not alone. There is life after trauma, and you can move from victim to thriver and create a life you can cherish. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. With me today is Brian Reese. We're going to be talking about PTSD and how it relates to our military veterans. This is a huge topic. It's something that I think is just not addressed enough. And, our military defends us, they protect us, they take care of us, and it's up to us to do the same for them. So Brian, thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome, Tracy. Thanks for having me on.
This is a big topic. I want to start off with, having you share a little bit about your backstory with our listeners.
Sure. So I'm a former U.S. military officer. I was commissioned out of the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs in 2007. Spent some time at Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix, Arizona, and then went out to Hanscom Air Force Base in Boston. And I did a combat tour in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, OEF, in Afghanistan in 2011. And I was actually there. I was at Kandahar Airfield, which is in southern Afghanistan. I was there actually during a time when troop levels were really at the peak in Afghanistan. I mean, in terms of coalition and NATO forces, 2010 through 2012 was really the peak of the buildup as far as troop levels. And so, you can imagine when that happens, there's going to be more attacks. I mean, that's just the reality of how it works. And so part of my responsibilities in Afghanistan were to help our Army and Marine folks navigate what's called RC South, which is southern Afghanistan. And I had a lot of rapid road repair contracts and things to help recover from IED damage and to keep supply lines running for coalition forces in the South. I had a Kandahar City prison contract. There was a situation that happened shortly before I got there where there was actually a prison break by the Taliban. And so I got to be the guy that helped patch and repair the hole of how they broke out, and then help try to facilitate the roundup. So really it was a security assistance type of a mission. And it was also a coalition and an economic building type of tour. So we built schools for Afghans, we built roads and hospitals. And so there's lots of things that I was able to participate in overseas to try to make things better for the local Afghans and then to keep our troops safe. And, on the one hand, it was a blessing and I did my duty. I experienced some pretty significant trauma and some pretty serious PTSD and PTSD stressors. And, it happened really about as soon as I got in theater. I mean, really, as soon as our plane landed, we got hit with a ton of what's called indirect fire. So a lot of rockets and mortars that are basically just fired by insurgents from various locations around where you are. And, they're really just hoping they get lucky in terms of where one lands and explodes. And so, living in that constant fear of, never knowing if here I am walking out of the chow hall and, am I about to be a smoking hole? And there were definitely some incidents and some scares there. We had a suicide bomber attack one of our main gates. We had a couple of active shooters on base. And so, just things like that, where you're sort of living in this constant state of fear of your own life and safety. And then, realizing that, like, wait a minute, this is the duty, I'm here to do it. Like, is this normal? And you try to normalize a very unnormal situation. And for me, I found that just almost immediately began having severe panic attacks, just depression. There were days where I had a hard time getting out of my bed to go to work. And I'll tell you, there was a time where I wasn't sleeping. I didn't want to eat. It's almost like time slowed down. Like I was consciously aware of my surroundings, but everything was in sort of this hazy fog. And I couldn't pull myself out of it. And one of my best friends, I'll tell you flat out, one of my best friends from the academy was actually deployed at Camp Leatherneck, which is a Marine base. It was about a 20-minute chopper ride west of my location. And he choppered in. I had been on the ground for about 10 days at this point, and he choppered in. This guy knows me better than probably anyone in my life, including anyone currently in my life. And we met up, and he saw me, and he literally came up to me and just he said, "What's wrong?" And I just reached out and I hugged him, and I started crying. And I basically just told him, I said, "Please don't let them send me home." I remember saying that to him, and to say that now, it's like I had such a blatant disregard for my own life that I was willing to die. I was willing to sacrifice everything before I would be willing to tell someone and risk my boss or the military commander sending me home because I had a mental health issue in theater. And so he prayed with me, and he literally walked with me to what's called CAF Roll 2, which was the Kandahar Airfield mental health clinic. And there was an Army psychiatrist there. And I remember begging him not to give me a mental health diagnosis, because I thought that if I got a diagnosis that the military would have justification grounds to send me home. And I couldn't stomach the embarrassment that could come with that. And so the Army psychiatrist, I remember this. I'm like, literally, as I'm telling you this story, I'm sitting in this wooden crate thing. It's basically like a makeshift building made out of lumber. And I remember he wrote down combat fatigue and adjustment disorder. And, still at that point, I didn't even know what an adjustment disorder was. He did not write down PTSD. That happened later, probably because I begged him not to. But he started me on a low dose of medication, and I started seeing him, I'm pretty sure every 3 to 4 weeks for the rest of the time I was there. And the part that is, I still think is amazing about the story, Tracy, and for all of our vets out there, nobody knew. I never told my commander. My troops didn't know. The people I was living with didn't know. I didn't even tell my own parents. And it was just, I was so embarrassed and afraid that if anybody found out about this, I was going to be kicked out. And it's one of the things, the reason I'm telling you this story is it's one of the things that the military culture has got way wrong, and they still haven't fixed it.
Right.
We have to create and enable a culture. That's the word, culture, which, by the way, if anybody doesn't know, the word culture means care. The word culture actually means care. And yet, for some reason, in the United States military, and even today, because I talk to active duty troops, I talk to Guard, I talk to Reserve, there is still a fear, there's still a stigma that if you're open and honest about your mental health issues, you'll be stripped of your rank, you could be kicked out, you could lose benefits, you could be med boarded, your chain of command is going to find out. It's the military is not doing enough to make it okay to be open, honest, and uncomfortably vulnerable about mental health. And I'm on a mission to change that. I mean, literally, that's why I tell my story, is to say that, look, even if you're quote unquote a high achiever, a top performer, a military general, a Navy SEAL, it doesn't matter. This is an all of us issue. It affects all ranks. It affects all genders, people of all shapes and sizes, ethnicity. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And yet there's still this stigma of, if you have a mental health condition, you're broken, you're weak, you're somehow less than. And look, I'm here to tell you, it couldn't be further from the truth. If you actually admit that you've got some anxiety, depression, anger issues, insomnia, panic, whatever it is you're dealing with, relationship trouble, substance abuse issues, when you're finally honest about that, and when you finally seek help to try to get better, that's a sign of strength.
Absolutely.
It's not a sign of weakness. And I'll stop there.
It takes a lot to not only admit to yourself that there's something going on, but to be open and honest, to admit to others that there's something going on. And, you and I were talking before we started recording, the military beats it into you to take care of everybody else first, put yourself last. You're trained to look out for your troop, in no matter what happens to you. And so when you come home, now you're thrown into this world where you have to look out for yourself first. And I can imagine that just seems so foreign. I mean, I know, just from my own traumas, putting myself first felt selfish and all of that. So, I would have to imagine that taking care of yourself probably is very, very difficult when you come home.
I think it's one of if not the most hardest and most difficult thing for a military troop / veteran to get in their head. And look, I'm telling you right here, right now, and this is a painful lesson I learned. Okay. It cost me a marriage. It cost me years of alcoholism and drug abuse. It caused me years of fear, frustration, and anxiety and failures in my life, at work. I had to resign from federal service. And you got to hear me, because this is the one mistake that I made that I don't want you to make.
Right.
You have to take care of you first. And I'm going to say this again because it's so important. You have to take care of you first. It's not selfish. And the reason it's not selfish, and this is what I learned, is that if I can't take care of me first, I'm unable to take care of my family.
Mm-hmm.
I can't take care of my friends. I can't take care of my work. I mean, look, you're no good to anybody unless you get help and if you're not okay. And I think it's another one of these like strange dichotomies. It's like this, we have this cognitive dissonance over this issue. I think everybody does, of, yeah, but I'm a giver, I'm a helper, I'm a good friend, I'm always there for everybody else. You know what? That's great. I think that's fantastic. It's a great way to be. You humble yourself and you serve others. I mean, I truly believe that's what life's about, is to give your gift away in the service of others. But I can't do that. I can't give that gift away. I can't be an inspiration. I can't really truly serve somebody unless I take care of me first.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I would imagine, people feel alone. They feel like they're the only ones going through this, and that there's something wrong with them for having PTSD or, any type of mental health issues. And that can't be farther from the truth. I want to read a couple of stats that you sent me. About 11 to 20 out of every 100 veterans who served in operations Iraqi freedom and enduring freedom have PTSD each year. About 12 out of every 100 Gulf War veterans have PTSD. About 15 out of every 100 Vietnam veterans were diagnosed with PTSD. So that's a lot. You're not alone, and you're not broken.
Not even a little bit. And can I talk about those statistics
Absolutely.
real quick? I'm assuming those are from the VA, the VA's published stats. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So I used to advertise and publish those stats regarding PTSD. And what I figured out when I dug deeper into the numbers, because I actually asked, I said, where did this come from? I want to know the source file. Those numbers are statistics of veterans who are actively seeking treatment at the VA. Okay. We know for a fact that this is going to blow your brains. 75% of veterans alive today do not get any help from the VA. 75 out of 100 veterans alive. There's about 20 million veterans alive. Okay. That means about 15 million of the 20 million veterans don't have any VA benefits. They're not enrolled in VA healthcare. They get nothing from the VA. Okay. Those stats, I'm telling you, from serving 15,000 veterans personally over the last 5 years, every single veteran I talk to is dealing with either a diagnosed or undiagnosed mental health condition. Okay. Now, I'm not saying you have the condition. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. Okay. I don't know if you have PTSD. What I'm telling you is every single veteran I encounter is suffering from some type of mental health issue that's affecting them. Maybe it's depression, maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's insomnia, maybe it's PTSD, maybe it's non-combat PTSD, like a sexual harassment or a sexual assault situation. And so, look, I talk about this in my book. I think the VA's published stats are crap because they don't account for those veterans who don't seek help. Well, we know that that's the majority. The majority never seek help. They never talk about their mental health issues. And their life is just in this downward spiral. And I see the military and veteran suicide statistics. Military and veterans are more than 50% likely to take their own life than the normal civilian population. Wow. U.S. military military veterans are over 4 times more likely than someone who didn't serve to have post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay? We wonder why 22 plus veterans per day are taking their own lives. And you hit on the head, Tracy. One of the biggest issues is we suffer alone in silence. And we think that we're the only ones dealing with it. And I'm telling you right now, you are not alone. This is an all of us issue. If you wore the uniform, I can virtually guarantee you, whether you're willing to be honest about it or not, that you're suffering from symptoms of mental health.
Those numbers are just horrifying, the suicide rates. And, I've never served in the military, so I can't, it's hard for me to empathize because I've never gone through it. But I just don't even know. It's hard for me to say anything because I can't put myself in your shoes, so Brian, what do we do? How do we help our veterans? Because they need us. The government is letting them down, so it's up to us to take care of them.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Yeah. Look, we're working on it.
Yeah.
And we're working on it with our elected officials. I mean, I regularly have calls with House and Senate committee members. We work hard on veterans bills, things like expanding mental health care in rural regions, expanding access to telehealth and telemedicine for veterans who are unable to, physically get to a VA location. Yeah. We're working on a number of fronts, and I think the main answer here, I think, is that there is no one answer. I don't think there's one thing that we could do that's going to solve this. I think it's multi-pronged, it's multifaceted, and it's going to take years. I think, truthfully, though, I think it starts with awareness, and we're starting to see more of that. And I think along with the awareness, it's going to take human beings who are willing to be vulnerable and they're willing to step out and tell their story. Because the more we do that, the more we normalize it and the more we make it okay to talk about it. I'll tell you what, I said this in a Facebook post the other day. What Simone Biles did in the Olympics, whether you agree with her decision or not, I really don't care. My point in what Simone Biles did at the Summer Olympics by removing herself from the majority of competition, at least from the events that she thought was going to affect her physically and emotionally, the fact that she was willing to confront this and admit that she was having mental health issues and she had to remove herself from competition, I really think all her gold medals, that's not her legacy. Her legacy is going to be what she does around mental health.
Absolutely.
I'm telling you right now. And so look, the reason I'm on this show talking to you, Tracy, is to tell my story and to tell you that it's okay not to be okay.
Right.
Because I live it every day. Yeah. Every single day. And the more that we see people like, I don't know if anybody knows this, but Dwayne The Rock Johnson, right? Highest paid actor in Hollywood right now, former World Wrestling machine. He spent a lot of years suffering alone with depression. And nobody knew. And he's actually quoted as saying, when I finally realized that I wasn't alone in my depression, that's when everything started to improve for me. That's when life got better. That's when he sought help. And so, last thing I'm going to show, U.S. Navy SEALs. Okay, everybody sees these U.S. Navy SEAls on, TV and the Bin Laden raid and the rescue of Captain Phillips and all of these heroic, selfless acts of heroism that we just, in this country, we celebrate, and we see them as like the ultimate badasses.
Right.
Okay. Well, guess what? I'm personal friends with many of them. One of my dear friends here in Austin used to lead all of the training of new SEALs at BUD/S. Every single one of them has a pretty dang serious mental health condition. They're all dealing with it. PTSD, depression, anxiety. Many of them were dealing with those things while they were in service. And yet we somehow celebrate that, like, these ultimate tough guys and gals are the ones who, they're not broken, they're physically fit, they're capable of anything. Yeah, they are, but they're mentally broken. And many of them, they never recover. And so, again, I'm telling the entire world right now, whether you served in military or not, this is an all of us issue. The statistics show 231 million Americans, 70% of the US population, has experienced a traumatic stressor that's significant enough to cause PTSD. I'm going to say that again because you need to hear this. Statistics show, and you can look it up. Okay? Statistics show that 70% of all Americans, that's 231 million, have experienced a traumatic event or stressor that's significant enough to cause PTSD. And again, think about that. 7 out of 10 people that you see walking around in your neighborhood have suffered from serious trauma. And yet, for some reason in this country, we still think we can't talk about it. We still think there's this stigma. It means you're broken. It means you're crazy. It means you're less than.
Right.
It means you're human. It means you're a human being. That's what it means. And that's a long-winded way of answering your question, Tracy. I think the number one way we're going to solve this is by rapidly increasing awareness, by boosting funding for all mental health programs around the world, by having more celebrities and athletes and everyday Americans tell and share their story. I think that's where we need to begin. And I think we're at this tipping point. We're starting to see it happen.
Yeah.
And now we need to pour gas on this fire, and we need to get the message out there to the entire world.
That's what we're trying to do. Brian, this has been fantastic. How can people find you?
Sure. Yeah. If anybody needs help, we specialize in VA disability compensation claims for U.S. military veterans. We've helped over 15,000 veterans to date in our membership programs. We're unbelievably passionate about changing the narrative and mental health for veterans. And we create a safe space for folks live and in community where we talk about this stuff. And we make it okay for you to pick up the phone and call the VA and get help. And if you need some help, you can reach us at vaclaimsinsider.com. You can either get started free on our website, or you can shoot us a note if you want to talk.
Fantastic. And listeners, I'll have all of Brian's contact information and also the link to his book in the show notes. As always, just go to releasingtraumapodcast.com, pull up Brian's show, and all his information will be there. Brian, thank you so much for coming on and being vulnerable and sharing your story with us, and just reminding us that, you're not alone and there is hope.
There is hope. The last thing I'll leave you with is a friend of mine told me this a while back, and it's something that I've internalized. And this was actually before I started serving and supporting veterans. And he told me, Brian, there can be beauty in the brokenness. And I remember thinking at the time, like, that doesn't even make sense. That's not possible. And I've now believed that that's 100% true. There can be beauty in your brokenness, because it starts with identifying that there's a problem and that you need to get some help. And your entire life can be unleashed for the better when you start being honest about your mental health.
That's a good place to leave it. Thank you. Listeners, thank you as always for tuning in. We'll talk to you in the next show.